Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome back to another live session on the Declassified Caribbean News and Commentary Network. Now, crime is becoming one of the defining challenges facing the Caribbean. We are going to be looking at why is crime exploding across the Caribbean, and this is a very important topic because it is one which affects everybody, right? From the upper classes to the lower classes of all the Caribbean nations. Now, from gang violence and rising homicide rates to firearms trafficking and organized crime, many people are asking whether the region is confronting a crisis unlike anything we've ever seen before. This afternoon, we'll examine what's driving this surge, which countries are most affected, and what governments are doing or failing to do to address this problem. Now, this is what we're going to look at this afternoon. From the very beginning, violence has been central to the Caribbean's relationship with, global power. During slavery, force was not incidental, it was the system. Enslaved Africans were controlled through brutality, whippings, mutilation, family separation, and constant surveillance. So they were surveilled all the time. Violence was both punishment and policy, designed to extract labor and crush resistance on plantations that fueled European wealth. After emancipation, the violence did not disappear, it evolved. Colonial authorities imposed new systems of control through economic coercion, racial hierarchies, and state repression. Workers who protested, unfair wages or conditions were met with police and military force. Across the 19th and early 20th centuries, uprisings in Jamaica, Trinidad, and elsewhere were often suppressed violently, reinforcing a structure where power remained external and local populations were kept in subordinate positions. In the modern era, the tools have changed, but the patterns are harder to ignore. The Caribbean sits along major drug trafficking routes, linking producers in Latin America to consumers in North America and Europe. This has flooded parts of the region with illegal firearms and fueled organized crime networks. Many of these weapons originate in the United States, where legal and illegal gun markets feed transnational flows. The result is a cycle of violence that disproportionately affects Caribbean societies, rising homicide rates, gang activity, and overstretched security systems. While local factors, governance, inequality, and policing play a role, external demand for drugs and the steady flow of weapons amplify the crisis. Some analysts argue that this dynamic represents a modern form of structural control where the region remains locked into global systems that extract value while exporting instability. While it is not slavery in the historical sense, the comparison reflects a deeper concern that external forces continue to shape Caribbean realities in ways that generate violence, limit sovereignty, and constrain long-term development. So we're going to be looking at these issues this afternoon, and we're going to be starting off with some clippings, right, from some videos. We'll begin with that. Then we're going to move into some articles, and we are going to discuss your comments, how you are responding to this very important topic that we have to discuss here this afternoon. So the first thing that I would like to highlight, let me just get this off my screen. I wonder why it came up on my screen at this point in time. But what we have to look at is that violence is something that has been institutionalized in the region. I'm trying to get this off my screen, so give me a second so I can get this off and get you to watch this video. Okay, so let me continue with this and show you the first video. Okay, good. So let us look at Haiti first. We're going to look at, they're telling us that Haiti is plagued with a lot of violence. So let us look at Haiti as the first country that is plagued with violence. That's in the news, and we have to look at Haiti. But all our countries are plagued with violence. So Haiti is not the only country, but we shall look at Haiti first, and then we're going to look at other Caribbean countries as we go along. So let me put that up on the stage, and then let me now turn up the volume so that you can listen to it. Okay, go ahead.
Miami. But from this 5-mile stretch up the Miami River, where officials
very hard to pull.
All bound for Haiti.
The Department of Homeland Security has some of the best interdictors in the world and the best inspectors in the world, right? But this is daunting. There's no way anybody can do all. This is one warehouse on this river.
Packages are already sealed and, according to Salisbury, lacking proper documentation, since anything claimed to be worth less than $2,500 doesn't have to be declared.
Usually paper manifest, handwritten.
The weapons fueling the violence mostly come from the U.S.
This is where the majority of weapons in Haiti come from, Miami, Florida. But not from the giant containers leaving the port of Miami, but from this 5-mile stretch up the Miami River, where officials say they're nearly impossible to find. Hard to police.
Okay, right. So we see that. Let me stop this now. And we are going to look at another. We're going to look at another video which is highlighting that the United States is the country from which our crime and violence is largely coming from. And we always have to look at the root cause. Where is this? What is really fueling crime and violence in our countries? And we're looking at the history, and we're looking at what is happening even within recent history. Sometimes we're going back to slavery, but we don't have to go back to slavery, even though slavery is the root cause. Right, but there are other factors in recent history that is also fueling what we're seeing here in the region. So we're going to be looking at this also, and let me just get this up on the screen about Jamaica. We're moving to Jamaica now, from Haiti to Jamaica, and we're coming to Trinidad and some other countries. So please bear with us and what we're looking at this afternoon. So let us look at this clipping here of a video which tells us about what is happening in Jamaica, as far as the genesis of crime and violence in that part of the hemisphere, in that neck of the woods. Make sure you're saving the live. I know that some of you are not interested in history, but that is what you have to understand. This is not a channel here for gossips. We're here to understand and to cement things in an intelligent way so that we can have an intelligent discussion. A lot of what we have in the Caribbean is really limited to emotionalism and not intellectual grounding, rooting our understanding into intellectual and scholarly talk. Now, discussion. So let me just turn up the screen and turn up the volume, and you can listen to this.
He built relationships with Fidel Castro.
Let me
he pushed for economic independence from Western powers. All right, so but nobody taught you about Jamaica, right? You see, in the 1970s, Michael Manley was elected Prime Minister of Jamaica. He was partnerships with Fidel Castro. He pushed for economic independence from Western powers. Washington viewed that as a problem. See, declassified documents and investigative reporting have since confirmed that the CIA ran destabilization operations in Jamaica during this period. Weapons were trafficked into the country. Political violence escalated sharply. You see, the 1976 election season saw assassination attempts, community attacks, and the state of emergency declared before voting even begun. As a matter of fact, 2 gunmen entered Bob Marley's home in December 1976 and shot him days before a major peace concert. See, Bob, being the person he is, performed anyway, wounded, of course. See, Manley won that election, but the pressure continued until his government collapsed economically in 1980. The violence that emerged from that era did not disappear when the politics changed. The Garrison communities, the armed factions, the culture of political tribalism, all of it outlasted the Cold War that created it. And Jamaica is so people know your history.
So he's telling us, he's imploring us to study our history, to know the facts, that the genesis of crime and violence in Jamaica is coming from the decades of the 1970s into the 1980s, right? And these genesis, these seeds that were planted still continue to affect us today, right? Until today, that until we begin to look at the genesis, the seeds, then and the foundation, then we will not be able to quell the problem of crime and violence in the region. Let's now move to Trinidad. We're going to look at some of the root cause of Trinidad, the violence that is affecting that country right now as we speak. There is, a problem with the violence that we're seeing in Trinidad and Tobago. So let's get that on the screen and put that up and begin. Of course, we have the. All right, so let me get that on the
Trinidad's
screen.
crime crisis has roots in
And
colonial
then I will
policies that deliberately
rewind the
divided
video. All right,
Afro-Trinidadian
I will
and
rewind the video.
Indo-Trinidadian
Okay.
communities.
Let me rewind the video.
After slavery ended in 1838, the British brought in.
Okay, so let me go back to the video and get it on the screen. Okay, so let me turn up the volume.
Why is Trinidad under a state of emergency again in 2026? On March 3rd, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar declared a state of emergency due to gang violence and mass shootings. But here's what they won't tell you. Trinidad's crime crisis has roots in colonial policies to replace freed Africans on plantations. They kept both groups separate, gave them different jobs, different villages, different religions. They wanted competition, not unity. Fast forward to independence.
But I had it on the
Today, gang violence all years ago. Your ancestors were never enemies. The system made them that way, and it's still working. Comment your parish or region below. Follow for.
All right, so we see that there is a historic racial, underpinning as far as the violence in Trinidad and Tobago is concerned. We're looking at the history, we're looking at why is crime exploding across the Caribbean. It does not have to do only with what they're telling us. They're much more to what we need to know that they're not telling us. So that is what we're here to explore on our channel, this Declassified Caribbean. Make sure you are liking and you are sharing the live so that we can have more people join in this very important discussion. So let me share this with you right now, another clipping, as we get into the history and we get into an intelligent conversation of really what is happening in this region as far as crime and violence is concerned. All right, and we're hearing some of it from the horse's mouth. People are telling us that these things have been happening. People who work for intelligence agencies, as this man now is going to tell us, that he worked for intelligence agency and he can avow that the United States is responsible for a lot of what we're seeing in the region. Oh, let me turn up the volume. Sorry about
the
that.
healthcare system has collapsed.
Let me see if I can.
Unfortunately, neighboring. When you
look
look at a map of the Balkans, you might notice that Croatia is shaped like a giant.
Okay, well, let me go back up here. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not coming. Why is it?
Controlled 85% of Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince. Over 5,600 people were killed, and nearly half of the country faced acute hunger, representing one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in the world today. So how did the Haitian state fail so dramatically that this was allowed to happen? I'm a former intelligence analyst now working as a risk and security consultant, and in the early 19th century, Haiti was the site of the world's only successful slave revolution. After gaining independence, France eventually took action to demand that former plantation owners be compensated for, quote, lost property, including enslaved people. This independence debt required Haiti to borrow from French banks at high interest rates, and these payments consumed up to 80% of the national budget until the debt was fully paid off 122 years later. This basically doomed Haiti unstable because instead of being able to invest in its own economy, it was forced to pay its debts. Then, from 1915 to 1934, the U.S. occupied the invading, ostensibly to restore order, but really to protect American banking interests. The U.S. seized Haiti's gold reserves and moved them to New York. Then it rewrote Haiti's constitution to allow foreign land ownership, which had been forbidden since the country's inception, and to impose a segregated racial hierarchy in every position of authority. And when the U.S. finally withdrew, they left a political vacuum that corrupt strongmen were able to exploit. The decades after that really deserve their own video, but the short version is that the of dollars. Eventually, in 2010, a powerful earthquake struck Haiti, killing hundreds of thousands of people and destroying the state's capacity to respond. This period saw the mass release of prisoners in the country, many of whom eventually became gang leaders, and the subsequent years didn't get any better. In fact, in 2021, Haitian President Moïse was assassinated, and this created a power vacuum for gangs to exploit. By 2024, the state ceased to function entirely, with no elected officials remaining in office across the country. A shrinking police force struggling to maintain crisis is unfortunately worse than ever. Over a million Haitians, or roughly 9% of the population, are internally displaced. Almost half of the population faces acute food and deported over 200,000 Haitians. And Haiti's only hope may be to welcome the very foreign intervention that put it in this situation to begin with. In 2024, gangs controlled 85% of Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince.
In
Over
Haiti,
50...
we're seeing the fact that, he's laying the history of slavery, history of colonialism, history of occupation, U.S. occupation that, lasted from 1915 to 1934. Right, and then afterwards we had the Duvaliers, and then we had the whole matter of the Jean Bertrand Aristide, United States deposing a democratic elected president, among other things that were happening in Haiti. So these are the things that we are seeing in today's world and in the Caribbean, and we have to understand the genesis before we can understand what is happening in the world. Now, let's look at some of what you're saying here. We have greetings. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining the program. We have here that then we have, let's go to some of your comments. Most of the illegal firearms trace back to U.S. origin, Second Amendment guns flooding nations that are restrictive with firearms user licenses. Yes, and one of the things that we need to, separate is the Second Amendment, which gives Americans the freedom of having guns, and also the organized crime, which is the trafficking of arms. Now, these two are separate, and we have to be careful of that, because one of the reasons for which U.S. citizens were accorded the rights to have firearms in the Constitution is to fight against a dictatorial government. Without the citizens being armed, they cannot fight a government that is going to be dictatorial. That is what we have to understand. Now, there is an element in the United States that is seeking to disarm the citizens of the United States, but they're not seeking to destroy and to annihilate the military-industrial complex and the ones who produce the manufacturers of these arms that are sending these weapons to fight wars and to destroy societies. So we have to make that distinction. A lot of times we are on board with them saying that, yes, U.S. citizens need to be disarmed. But if they are disarmed, how are they going to fight a government that might be dictatorial and want to take away their rights? That was one of the reasons for which the Constitution, had the Second Amendment there, to protect Americans against a dictatorial government. Now, when we have here, Singapore left the Privy Council in 1994. They execute drug traffickers and weapon traffickers and criminals who shoot guns during the commission or crime. Singapore is one of the safest nations. Now, yes, and that is true, but we also have to look at how are they safe, because they are authoritarian. Now, do we want to live in an authoritarian state? I think that we have to also begin to look at some of the policies that are designed by some countries like China and countries in Asia, Singapore, and ask ourselves the question, do we really want to be like these people? Is it that we want to be like them, or we want to be living in a free country where we are allowed, within the law, right? Within the law to do what we want to do freely, or we want to be policed and surveilled by governments, as which they are trying now to implement here in the West, right? We have to ask ourselves these very important questions. Now, statistics saying 1,000 guns and 1,000 rounds of ammunition is all it takes to destabilize a Caribbean nation. Yes, and remember now that it is much more than destabilizing us. That is one of the agendas, but they're also making huge sums of profits, right? The military-industrial complex is making hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sales of these firearms. So this is an industry, it's a business that we also have to understand, while it is destabilizing, right, and also causing havoc in the Caribbean region. Now, she continues to say, we need to hang drug traffickers and weapons traffickers in the Caribbean and Latin America. They need to die faster than their enterprise can kill members of civil society. Now, who do we need to hang? Sometimes, the ones who are doing it, or the ones who are making these policies, and also, they are the helm of the drug trafficking. So when we look at the military-industrial complex, and all of these enterprises and corporations that control the trafficking, aren't these the persons that should be hanged? Or is it the person on the street that you are suggesting should be hanged? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves, okay? These are very important questions that need to be asked, okay? So, yeah, so this is what we're saying. And here we have an article from the UK Guardian newspaper, and that is the Caribbean island of Trinidad grapples with a national crisis of violence. And killings of women and girls in Trinidad and Tobago have reached an all-time high, while police and politicians are failing to tackle rising crime rates. And they're saying here in the article, the hurricane season is underway in the Caribbean, but the tropical storms that batter much of the region miss the island of Trinidad, which is protected by its northern mountain range. Now, the birthplace of calypso, steel pan, and soca music, a fusion of African and Indian culture of these descendants of slaves and indentured laborers, respectively, the tiny nation's musical influence is global. But as of last month, the murder toll across the twin island state of Trinidad and Tobago was on track to overtake last year's all-time high. As rates rise, more women are being killed than any other point in history. And this is coming as of May. This year's death toll was 280, right? And, we know that the murder rate there in Trinidad and Tobago is climbing. It's climbing, and it's beginning to get very out of hand in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, I understand that in Trinidad and Tobago, the homicide rate this year is standing at 27 per 100,000 in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to be looking at that very shortly. But let us look at another video. I think I had you look at this already, another clipping of the video. While you're getting here, I'll just show the clippings until you get here, because some of you are coming and going. If you're not interested, we can move on to another topic. I find that you're not interested in topics that are very important. So I don't know what's going to happen here in our region if you are trying to escape very important topics like these. But guess what? I'll do them nonetheless, because it's important. When it hits you, you will understand. All right, so let's get the video on the screen. I have it already. Let me get the volume up.
The Jamaica Labor Party side, and behind them was the CIA in terms of getting for bringing weapons back into Jamaica from the United States. The CIA would help to create a consciousness among poor people, among the great majority of Jamaicans. And of course, naturally, the climate was created for an attempt on Bob Marley's life of violence and armed robbery and murder, coupled with the propaganda campaigns calling for the overthrow of the Manley government, naturally created a situation of terror, really, of tension, of uncertainty, of doubt, and fear.
Marley, who had never expressed a political affiliation, was suddenly thrust into the political arena when both parties sought his endorsement.
For a while and see if it will come back. It will come back. I'm not sure what is happening here. Okay, let me stop it, and we're gonna replay it. Okay, let me replay that. Let me replay that thing here so you can see the entire thing, because not sure what happened. So let me go back with this this topic here with the CIA and Jamaica. Don't know what happened there. So let me share your screen again, and we will look at that clipping. Okay, so let me go back here and put it on the screen again and get it up. Very important clipping here and very historical, good history, right? We have to look at the history. Very important to look at the history.
Instrument in the entire campaign against the Michael Manley government. Most of the violence was coming from the Jamaica Labor Party side, and behind them was the CIA in terms of getting the weapons in and getting the money in with the campaign of propaganda against the Manley government. The weapons was a perfect route for bringing weapons back into Jamaica from the United States. The CIA would look upon the radical political content of reggae music as dangerous because it would help to create a consciousness among poor people, among the great majority of Jamaicans. And of course, naturally, the climate was created for an attempt on Bob Marley's life. The purpose of all those activities of violence and armed robbery and murder, coupled with the propaganda campaigns calling for the overthrow of the Manley government, naturally created a situation of terror, really, of tension, of uncertainty, of doubt, and fear.
Marley, who had never expressed a political affiliation, was such when both parties sought his endorsement. Marley, however, was wary of the risk that came with being associated with a political figure during such a volatile time. Candidates on stage and have them shake hands, showing the good intentions of both of the leaders. But false rumors that he was supporting Manley began to circulate, and posters started appearing around Kingston suggesting that Marley was going to do the concert on the front lawn of Prime Minister Manley's home. Both parties did eventually agree to have the concert at a neutral site, but it was too late. Marley's perceived favor for Manley made him a target for the conservative right, which included the US and the CIA. Aware that his life was in danger, Marley hired a security detail to guard his home 24/7. However, on December the 3rd, 1976, his guards were strangely absent when 2 carloads of gunmen came to kill him. They ran through his compound, shooting everybody that they could find, and Marley was hit, along with his wife Rita, who was shot in the head, and a few of his crew members. Now, the concert that he had,
CIA was using the Jamaican Labor Party as its instrument in the entire campaign against the Michael Manley government. I'd say most of the violence was coming from the Jamaica Labor Party side, and behind them was the CIA in terms of getting the weapons and getting the money in with all the propaganda guidance, because there was a steady stream, a continuous campaign of propaganda against the Manly government. The weapons, there was no problem with getting weapons in, because the ganja smuggling was a perfect.
All right, so I think this video is finished. All right, so we're going to look at another one, because we want to get the historical analysis, and then we are going to listen to what you are saying, what you have to say based on what you're seeing, and have some important, conversation on this very important topic. All right, so let me go look at the other topic. Then we have, let me go here, and we have this here. We can look at this here at the this other video that I think I had.
One of the most dangerous garrisons with one of the most highest murder rates in the whole of Jamaica. I can't give away the exact location of the garrison, but just know it wasn't a safe place to be.
Earlier, I saw there's people watching at the roads. Why would people watch the roads? Is that in case police or anything come?
Yes, that is it.
And do the police come around here much?
Regular basic.
Yeah.
Regular.
If you get caught with a gun, what happens in Jamaica?
Jamaica, the government right now, passing a law right now. A couple months ago, say 15 years for a gun. More than 15 years for a gun right at this moment.
Is crime going down?
Going down. Sky high to go.
Well, why is that? Why is crime so high?
PMP in a power. Most young youth work. MP coming in power. Crime. If PMP was in a power, enough young youth have work every day. Worse and worse. Since this man coming to power.
Who's in power at the moment? What's his name?
Anjolis, man.
How do you feel about Anjolis?
Step aside and go one side.
Who voted him in?
All them Lebanese get a look for a job to get turned on.
So PMP won't work for the Jamaicans, but Labour's anti almost.
That is it. Kill obviously.
Do you reckon that's affected your head and your mindset?
No, man. When we drink rum and smoke, we eat weed, man. We're all right, man.
That's crazy. Have you got any children? Or do you plan to have children?
Yeah, man, I have children, man.
Would you want them to be in the same life that you're in?
That's why, no. 10 brother, 10 different mind, no. None of them want to come follow them father and them,
And when was the last time you committed a murder?
Last week, man.
Last week?
Yeah, man. Kill about 3 of them already around, so, man. Go and look out of them, yeah, man. War now done till we tell it done, man.
This next interview was done in one of the most dangerous garrisons with one of the most highest murder rates in the whole of Jamaica. I can't give away the exact location of the garrison, but just know it wasn't a safe place to be.
Earlier, I saw there's people watching at the roads. Why would people watch the roads? Is that in case police or anything come?
Yes, that is it.
And do the police come around here much?
Regular basic.
Yeah.
Regular.
If you get caught with a gun, what happens in Jamaica?
Jamaica, the government right now, passing a law.
Okay, so I thought we have watched that, and we are seeing that a lot of the violence in the Caribbean, we have violence that is due to political tribalism. We have violence that is due to racism in the Caribbean, right? In which we're looking at Trinidad. We looked at Trinidad and we saw that there is a division between the Indo-Trinidadians and also the Afro-Trinidadians. And the legacy of colonialism has left that imprint on Trinidad. In Jamaica, we saw where the CIA was active in the 1970s and 1980s and has left that political tribalism that they use in that country so that they can traffic guns and drugs. Because that's what they do. They divide the people, right, into racial tribes or into political tribes, and then they send guns and drugs, and then the United States can occupy and control that country. And that is exactly what they do all the time. So we are seeing the genesis. Now, do you think that our present government will want to tackle crime and violence? I don't think they want to or will ever do that. Why? Because it is a profitable industry. Secondly, it helps them to control and to have more power over us. And that's exactly what is happening in the Caribbean. So we will see the loss of many other lives until we wake up as a region. And based on what I'm seeing, we will never wake up. Never wake up, because our Caribbean people are so much caught up with other distractions that they're not able to look at root causes. We don't want to read the history. We don't want to have anything to do with anything that stands at the root. What happens to us is that we want to be entertained with information, thinking that it's Miss Mia Motley or it is Dr. Irfan Ali, and thinking that these are the major actors controlling what is happening in our own countries when they are not. Now, the UK Guardian here said last year that leaders in the Caribbean have pledged to join forces to tackle crime and violence as they reaffirmed their support for Haiti, which the UN says continues to be paralyzed by gangs. Taking the reins as chair of the Caribbean Community CARICOM, a bloc of 15 countries, Andrew Holness, who he was the former, chair of CARICOM, Jamaica's prime minister, said security in the region would be a matter of great priority under his chairmanship. The prime minister raised concerns about the current pace of the international momentum to support Haiti as he addressed the opening of this week's CARICOM Leaders Summit. He committed to prioritizing support for the Caribbean nation, which is a member of CARICOM. Speaking to The Guardian at the conference, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, said the challenge of crime and security is one of the most significant existential threats facing the region. It requires a collaborative approach among CARICOM countries, and we recognize that the criminals are getting far more sophisticated. And when you look at the issue of transnational criminal activities, it is important for us to conjoin our efforts, he said. Now, echoing his sentiments, Terence Drew, the St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister, said he welcomed a regional approach to the issue. The region is dealing with the issue of security on multiple levels, Haiti being the area that is most affected. I think this would require, of course, the coordination of all of the member states of the CARICOM. So I welcome the reiteration of us working together as a region, he said. Now, listen to what they're saying. Even as the conference was opening in Montego Bay, Jamaica on Sunday, Haiti's once iconic hotel, Olafenson, a beloved Gothic gingerbread building in Port-au-Prince that inspired books, hosted parties, and attracted visitors from Mick Jagger to Haitian presidents, was burned down by gangs. According to the UN, since January, more than 4,000 people have been killed in Haiti, a 24% increase compared with the same period last year. Now, Dr. Andrew Holness is suggesting that they should deal with these criminal elements as they approach that, like terrorists. So they want the Caribbean area to be a nation where we are going to be dealing with crime and violence as they are dealing with the war on terror. That is something that is incredible. Now, if we are going to deal with crime as they are dealing with the war on terror, are they going to militarize the region? That's what we have to understand, that if we are going to be here saying that everything, because the region is taken over by crime and violence, but who are the terrorists and which are the persons responsible for creating the crime and violence epidemic that we see here in the region? Let me see what you guys are saying. We have here, hello everyone, good evening everyone, and let me hear what you're saying. Hello, Michelle Forrester, thank you so much for joining. We're looking at why is crime exploding across the Caribbean? And Alexis says leaders in the Caribbean need to be seriously transparent and invite the population to help take part in funding solutions. Right, as we're suggesting here that they don't want to get rid of it because it's an industry. And the private sector and the oligarchs of the Caribbean, along with the oligarchs of international coming from the United States, from Canada, from all of these worlds, these major metropolitan nations, they are responsible and they stand at the helm. They're making huge dividends on crime and violence. And many of us are not understanding it. So they don't really want to tackle it. They only tackle it when it's getting out of hand, that it might be spilling over and could affect them. Apart from that, they have absolutely no interest in curbing crime and violence. Because if that goes, it's just like slavery. If slavery should go, and slavery was what? Violent. Slavery was perhaps one of the most, if not the most violent institution that humanity has ever seen. That's the Western form, the transatlantic slave trade. However, it was beneficial to the elites, and they never wanted to get rid of it, even though hundreds of thousands of slaves were being slaughtered yearly. Okay, so we must understand that we are now the slaves. the population of the Caribbean. We are the slaves on a plantation controlled by these oligarchs. They're making billions of dollars, if not trillions, from the drug trade and the trafficking of arms. So they have no intention of curbing getting rid of crime and violence. Okay, and we will have to deal with it. If we are the ones who are going to have to deal with it, not them, and they're not going to deal with it. In fact, this morning I was reading a brochure that came from the DR, and they were looking at the fact that crime and violence is a problem in their country. And do you know that it's 8.9 per 100,000, their crime rate, the stats is in the DR. When you look at countries in the Caribbean, which I will be looking at shortly, we are way higher. Jamaica is 25 per 100,000. I think Trinidad and Tobago is 27 per 100,000 per the statistics for 2026. Okay, so while the DR is suggesting that they are alarmed by their 8.9 per 100,000, we in the region are not alarmed, and they are even suggesting that they will have to take it within their hands because the politicians are not interested. So if the DR citizens can realize that their politicians are not interested, can you imagine us? What should we be doing? Now, Alexis says there is a lot of interference from the West and those countries that remain colonial imperialist. Yes, and we also collaborate with them. So you find that the oligarchs in Haiti, they make what? Huge dividends, as I'm saying, and in Jamaica, in Trinidad, all around the Caribbean, they're making huge profits from crime and violence. So when we look at imperialism, let's also understand that our government, or we call them governors, right? Remember now that during colonialism, you'd have the colonies and you have a governor that would, oversee that colony. Our governors, our presidents, our prime ministers, okay, are the overseers of our respective countries. And what they do, they actually listen to the call and beckon of the imperialist states, and they make money from such. So they are the ones who are overseeing it, and they don't care. Okay, so we have to make sure that we have that and take these factors into consideration. Now, let's continue to look at some other clippings that I had downloaded for you here for you to view and to react to, because it's a lot of things that is happening, and we have to make sure that we educate ourselves as much as possible, because nobody's going to educate us if we don't. Now, this question was being asked by this person here, the citizen of Jamaica, and asking the question, why is Jamaica so violent and yet it has so many churches? All right, and so we can look at this and ask ourselves, and for many of us too, much of the Caribbean is quite religious, but he's asking the question about Jamaica. So let's look at what he's saying and see if we can answer his question, right? His curious question, that is. So let's get this on the screen and look at what is happening. Let me turn up the thing.
The churches on the island. That means no matter where there, you can't walk too far.
Let me rewind it.
Book up on one pastor. Yo, peeps, you ever really stop and think about this? Jamaica have the most churches per square mile than anywhere else in the world. 100 or one church bell a ring. Hear this. While we have the most churches, Jamaica also have one of the highest murder rates. And ask yourself how this makes sense. Or you have the most pastors and the most crime at the same time. It's like the prayers them are get in the cloud or got blocked with number up on WhatsApp or something. I'm not lie. We need to check if heaven using Florida digital because something just not right. No, Panari.
Okay. This is something quite, controversial, and we want to discuss it for a little while before I go on to the next clipping. The whole matter of spirituality, right, in the region. And I think that as time goes by, perhaps after the 1990s into the 2000s, the Caribbean region has gotten less spiritual, right? We are following our colonial masters. Everything they do, we do. They're atheists and we become atheists. They are, they have become very materialistic, and we also have become extremely materialistic. Gone are the days when people would send their children to Sunday school or to Sabbath school, even if they were not religious. Your parents wanted to send you to Sunday school or to Sabbath school so that you could get some amount of values in children. But what role do you think the church can play if people do not want to be religious, if people do not want to abide by decency? What do you think the church can do? Do you think the church can coercively, control crime and violence? No. Why? Because it's a conscience thing, right? You should know that taking a gun and killing somebody's and snuffing out somebody's life is something that is wrong, right? And no church or no parent can prevent you from doing that. The only thing that they can do, they can, of course, orientate you into what is decent and morally right. But they can't coercively and say that you can't do it. You will have to, just like your parents, they give you certain values before you leave home, but they cannot control what you do having left home. Right? So we can't blame the church for, for crime and violence if the church, but the one thing about what we need to understand too, is the church also involved in crime and violence? And in some cases, they are. And we need to identify some of the churches that are involved in this wicked traffic. Right? So that is what. So let me see what Alex is saying. I wonder, are they churches or are just a cover for thuggery and violence? Absolutely. There are some, not all, but there are some churches, as you're saying, Alexis, that are a cover for thuggery and violence. So they are a part of the problem. And that is why we have to read, we have to study. We can't lump everything into one and saying all churches are. Just like we say schools now are not doing what they should be doing. They are indoctrinating our children. But should we stop sending our children to school? Are schools still necessary? Yes, they are necessary because they are mediums of indoctrination. And even though they might not educate the students in the way that you want them to be educated, but at least they can get some social skills and they can get basic education and learn how to be civil citizens, right? But so the same thing about the church. What role does the church play in this whole matter of crime and violence that we see is so rooted and grounded in the Caribbean, where people are just snuffing out people's life like it's nothing, right? Something is wrong, and we have to be able to look at the root cause, right? Not necessarily at symptoms that we like to do all the time. Good night, Stephen Knight. Good night, everyone. I'm a little late. Yes, and thank you so much for joining. Let us look at another clipping, and we're going to, because we have a lot to discuss tonight. So let's get away with the clippings, and then we can talk about other issues that are on your mind. Before you start, the chat gets on fire. Let me just get these clippings out of the way, and you can now. This is a very important clipping here. With this young man is telling us the people. Let me turn it down. All right, let me get this. Okay. Okay. Let me get this on for you. This is talking about the number of crime in the crime rate in all the Caribbean. Well, most of the English speaking Caribbean, at least. I want you to listen this and make sure that you're following what he's saying. Stats. So we can't change. This is things we can't actually change. So let me put it on the screen, and then we will discuss this also. Okay, so let me turn up the volume now, and you can listen to it. Okay.
Right about the considering all the conflict that's going on there.
All right, let me go back to the top, okay? Because it's oh Lord, come on.
There's people in our real life, some interesting statistics here. So, you know, and we might not always want to talk about these things, but this is the Unalive 2026. So this is the number of unalivings per 100,000 people. And interestingly, Jamaica is at somewhat of an all-time low with 24 per 100,000 people. Right up at the top is Haiti, but it's to be understandable. But interesting, some of the other places which rank above Jamaica: Trinidad, Suriname, St. Lucia was a surprising one for me. And then right down with some of the lowest rates: Cayman Islands, Grenada, some of the French Caribbean, Martinique, and Puerto Rico too. So interesting stats. Jamaica, let's try to keep it going down. And I'll be looking more into this because I want to know how much this includes any unalivings by the security services in our real life. So let me know what you think and what your thoughts are on safety in the islands.
Okay, so let us look at the graph thing here. We have the Cayman Islands, and that is 2.3 per 100,000. Grenada 8.7. The Dominican Republic, which is a much bigger island to all of us, and they have just 8.7 per 100,000, and they are sounding their alarm here. They're sounding their alarm here in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic about crime, and yet still it's so low in comparison to the Anglo-Caribbean, right? Then we have Antigua and Barbuda, which is at 11.0. We have Martinique, 11.4. You know, why is it that the Anglo-Caribbean all-time high? Let us look at Barbados. Little Barbados is 17.7 per 100,000. I mean, for a small island in comparison to the DR, that is whoppingly high. And then we have the Bahamas, 20.6 per 100,000. Belize, 21.8. Jamaica 24.0, and Trinidad and Tobago 27.0. Suriname 29. That's a high small, well, that's not a small nation, I should say. And we have St. Lucia is 38.9 per 100,000, 7.6, right? 57.6. So these are some very high numbers. And where are we going? Where are we going with the sort of, you know, very poor, you know, this very high murder rate that we're seeing in the Caribbean, right? Where are we actually going with this sort of thing? You know, this is something that we have to watch, and this is something that we have to be concerned about. Yeah, the church can do more, but they have been quiet since the Trump administration came into power. A lot of nonsense is going on in the Caribbean, and these institutions are very quiet, right? You mean the ones in the Caribbean are quiet because the fact is that the church in America is very, very loud in terms of the Trump administration. It's almost like a theocracy. So the church in the United States perhaps is what, quietening the ones in the Caribbean, because Trump's church and the church that he's affiliated with, or, you know, the theocracy in America is growing, is at an all-time high. What about the murders carried out by the police? Do they count those? Also, they call it fighting crime, I believe. And that's what they're doing now. What they're doing, they're using now they're using draconic measures to control the population, including the brutality of police. So no, I don't think that they are going to incorporate the killings done by police officers, because we're moving into fascistic states. Whether we like it or not, all the Caribbean territories are moving into what is known as fascism, where they're suggesting to us that the state, if the state does the killing, then it's not going to be considered as a killing. It's going to be considered, as Stephen is saying here, as a crime-fighting strategy. And that is what we have to understand, that the entire system, including in the very US, where we're seeing now the militarization of the police force. The police force in the United States is being militarized, and the United States is also telling the Caribbean countries that they also need to militarize their police force and should use lethal killings if people threaten the status quo. Right? So in Jamaica, for example, the crime rate has gone down tremendously. It's now 25.0 per 100,000, down from 47 per 100,000, and sometimes in some cases, I think it went to 51 times. But the fact of the matter is, in Jamaica, people are crying out about police brutality, that police killings have actually increased dramatically. So that is what we have to understand. So what they want, what the New World Order want our police states. They want to convert all the world into what is called a police state, where the police will be the ones to actually, rein in whatever they think is a crime. And it could be that it might not be a crime, but they want to define what is a crime. And as Andrew Holness suggested, it should be treated as acts of terror. So they're telling us now that criminality should be treated as acts of terror. And you know what they're doing to the Middle East. You go there and you just shoot them and kill them because they are so-called terrorists. But who are really at the center? Who are the root cause? Who is creating the terrorism in the world? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Now, Stephen Knight is saying people need better livable wages and we need jobs. Right, but they're not going to talk about that. That is what they're not talking about. They're not looking at the fact of the economic conditions. They're saying that they have the strategies, and the strategies to curb crime and violence is more policing and more brutal policing, more lethal policing. All right, and that is what they're actually doing throughout the region. Now, when you go to Latin America, for example, to the DR, you would not expect crime to be high in the DR because everywhere you see a military guy with his gun. Okay, so crime and violence in the DR, that is why it's so low, because they have the entire force and the military out on every street. Every street corner, you're seeing them. And you go to many of these Latin American countries, to Brazil and these countries, you see them. So that is what we are essentially in the region promoting and becoming. And our citizens are fast asleep. Our citizens are fast asleep until their neighbors or until their family members are snuffed out. Their lives are snuffed out. Then they begin to cry and to mope and to wonder what is happening and to protest. And that is not going to stop it, because if you don't understand the root of it, then you will not be able to eradicate it. And that's the whole problem. Okay, so let's go now to another video that was interesting to see, and I was very surprised that many of you went off the thing when I was showing that, because if you should ask a typical person what's the crime stats, many people won't know, right? Many people won't know, but they're gone because they don't want to be educated. That's okay if we want to remain in ignorance in the Caribbean region. Now, then we have this another clipping I want to share with you that I had downloaded, that I had saved for you to see. And it took time for me to share these things with you. So let's look at what this lady is saying about the crime rate in Jamaica and what this political analyst said about it. So let me get it up on the screen first, and then we can listen to it. Wait for a second for it to come up. Okay, I think it's up now. So let me share the screen with you, and let's see what this political analyst is saying about crime, the crime rate, and the reduction, the so-called reduction on the island of Jamaica. All right, and then we can argue, we can discuss it, we can debate it, because that is what this program is all about, to debate things and to make sure we understand the facts and the intellectual content. All right, so let me turn up the volume. I might have to rewind it. Let me see if I can rewind the video.
A data scientist and epidemiologist at the University of Charles says Jamaica's murder crisis must be viewed in the context of long-term trends. Speaking on Power 106's morning agenda on Monday, Professor Charles that focusing only on the year-to-year changes misses a bigger issue of a steady rise in homicides since independence.
The murder rate in Jamaica went down from 49.3 in 2023 to 40.2 in 2024. That's according to data scientist and epidemiologist at the University of the West Indies, Professor Christopher Charles. Professor Charles says the small drop doesn't show the full picture.
All I'm saying is that what the government, some people in the media, and primarily the Jamaica Constabulary, what they have been doing is giving you the difference between the homicide rate this year and last year, and then saying all kinds of things about it. And I'm saying that's unscientific, it's dishonest, trick the people.
He says while the drop is still good, looking at only short-term numbers is misleading. Professor Charles also urged that short-term drops don't mean the police are fixing the issue.
So in 1962 at independence, the homicide rate was 3.7 per 100,000, right? In 2024, right, it was 40.4. It was, all right? So it's over a tenfold increase. So what I'm saying, we must appreciate the drop, but I'm not excited because if you look from 1997 onwards, we have seen similar drops, yearly drops, but the homicide rate increase again. So why when we see these drops, it's up and down.
He says to make Jamaica safer, real solutions are needed to fix the root of the problem, not just more police.
We have argued that you need to intervene within families in terms of parenting. You can teach parenting in schools, all over the school system, and you can intervene in the family. Just like how the community health nurse comes and look to the mother to check up, we can have social workers visit homes, in the same way, to engage about parenting when the mother comes to the hospital and she's pregnant, or the father. Our medical social workers can engage them over time.
A data scientist is an
that is something very interesting and something you have to look at. Notice that they're not talking about the economics, right? They're just talking, and yes, family, there is a confluence of factors which contribute to crime and violence, but they are trying as much as possible to ignore the economics. But yes, the family is important, right? So the family as an institution, people need to get back to that role, the role of the parents in actually dispensing good values to their children, good morals to their children. But we also need to look at the role of the schools he's suggesting and the role that they should play in fostering good values. But we can't neglect also spirituality, which we're moving away from. And I'm not suggesting here that spirituality means that you have to be a Christian, right? But there is some lacking of spirituality, the conscience that you are not going to be taught in a school, right? It still plays its role, and many of us are also not talking about that. But the economics is something that we often shy away from because governments do not want to give any long-term solutions to it, because they know if they talk about economics, then we're going to get them, you're going to vote them out of power because things are just not happening. So they're going to use the last resort is that they have to force you by using lethal force, even if they have to kill innocent people, to get people to understand that the government is not playing. All right, and that is what we have. So we have a justice system, as we see in the United States, that is corrupt, a political system that is not functioning, right? But they don't want to get us to know, to understand what is the root cause. We know also that we have the drug trafficking that they control, the private sector, the top business persons in Jamaica, in all of these countries control. The United States is at the center of it. And look at what they did the other day. They sent boats. They sent boats into the region. Not boats, but they sent ships to kill our people, our citizens. That's what Americans did, and said that they wanted to control drug trafficking and human trafficking and guns trafficking. At the end of the day, they did not put any dent into any of that. So what they're doing really is to control the population and not to solve the problem of crime and violence. Okay, not seeing any response, so let us go to another video, another clipping, so that we can learn as much from what is happening and what these analysts are saying or perhaps are not saying, right? And we are here to say and to talk about in tonight's discussion. Oh, right. I think I don't have to show you this one. I think this was what's talking about the top. Maybe I show it to you. All right. Let us say the top Caribbean economies. And you can tell me if you believe it or not, right? Depend on you. I think that it's believable to some extent, but you can show me what your arguments, what holes you see in this analysis of the top economies in the Caribbean. All right, so let me just share my screen with you, and then we are going to look at that. Look at that. Let us go at that, and then we are going to look at the and then we look at the okay. Why is it not playing? Okay, let me see if I can get this off and then get it on the screen and get it to the volume to play.
GDP of $7 billion, a sophisticated, stable republic that has pivoted from sugar to become a premier hub for international business, wealth management, and digital nomad talent. Number 9, Bermuda, with a nominal GDP of $9 billion, the Silicon Valley of insurance, a tiny island that acts as the world's risk capital and managing catastrophic coverage for global Fortune 500 companies. Number 8, the Bahamas, with a nominal GDP of $15 billion, the velvet rope economy, successfully combining high-end American tourism with a zero-tax offshore banking sector to create immense per capita wealth. Number 7, Jamaica, with a nominal GDP of $23 billion, a globally influential brand and logistics hub that leverages the massive port of Kingston and bauxite mining to punch far above its weight in trade. Number 6, Guyana, with a nominal GDP of $25 billion, the world's fastest growing economy, a rocket ship fueled by massive offshore oil discoveries. Number 5, Trinidad and Tobago, a nominal GDP of $26 billion, the energy factory of the South, boasting the region's most industrialized economy powered by oil, natural gas, and global ammonia exports. Number 4, Haiti, with a nominal GDP of $31 billion, a volume-based economy where a massive population and inflationary pressures keep the nominal numbers high, fueled almost entirely by remittances from the diaspora. Number 3, Cuba, with a nominal GDP of $100 billion, an economic anomaly operating under sanctions where the immense value of its 11 million strong population and medical exports is hard to quantify but undeniably massive. Number 2, Puerto Rico, nominal GDP of $126 billion, the region's industrial titan, generating massive wealth through U.S. pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturing, though its growth has slowed compared to the DR. Number 1, the Dominican Republic, nominal GDP of $130 billion, the new undisputed king of the Caribbean, surpassing Puerto Rico thanks to its diversified China-style economy of tourism, gold mining, and free trade.
All right, so the question is, who controls our economies? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Who controls? Look at Haiti. Haiti stands at the number 4 with $31 billion, right? So you really wonder, who is it that controls our economies? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. Did I see lots of things here? Yes, that's what we have to ask ourselves. Who is controlling our economies? Let me look at your comments here. I just seen other comments. In governance, is the Caribbean now taking orders from the U.S.? Well, as we saw in the clippings, the Caribbean has always been taking orders from the United States. There's never a time when we have not been taking orders from the States. At least since the 1950s and onward, yes, the Caribbean has always taken orders. We don't run the show. Or prime ministers and or presidents do not run the show. And that is why they have to accept the guns coming into the Caribbean, and they can do nothing about it. Stephen Knight is saying 4,574, I believe. So I look at some of the laws that Barbados is trying to implement. They almost mimic the laws that are in the United States. They are just crafty with the wording. Yes. Okay, so everything that is happening in the United States, and for that reason, I've always been saying we're doing a lot of wasting of time here with our podcast in the Caribbean region, because many of us, all we talk about is what Miss Mia Motley is doing, what she's not doing, but we're not looking at how what she's doing is connected to geopolitics and to the wider and broader agenda that is happening globally. And our Caribbean citizens are much ignorant of what is happening on the global stage. And that is something that is amiss, and something that we are the ones who support it, though, because we support people who are talking about domestic policies, which are not really going to help us, because that is not the route. They don't get their marching orders from the US. They're marching orders from the United Nations and from the World Economic Forum. They're not formulating their policies independently. Okay. Now, Zazie is saying that here seems like a general. Who is that? General theme here, and it seems like the problem with these colonial powers, they're not only right. And then we have another person here responding. We have a general theme here, and it is the interference of these colonial power, aka Babylon. They spread their violence all across the globe, American being the military arm and Europe the bankers. Very well said. This is very well said. This is very well said, and it shows you that there is an economic link. He's saying that the United States is the military arm and Europe the bankers. Okay, so do you see where the proceeds are from the crime and violence, the trafficking of arms, the trafficking of drugs go right into the banks? Okay, so do you think that our politicians are going to be encouraged, motivated, inspired to put a dent in crime and violence? No, just the symptoms. They will address the symptoms, and sometimes we see them addressing some of the symptoms, and the symptoms include the militarization and control of our population. If you should read Kevin Edmonds, I was trying to get him on this program, and I think he is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto or associate, but he speaks about the militarization a lot of the Caribbean states, that we are now a militarized zone. And many of us are still thinking that we're free. By the way, the pamphlet that I was reading today that was produced in the DR, they're saying that if you are not safe in your country, then you are not free. And they're right. If you are not safe, if you don't have a sense of security in your own country, your country is not independent. Your country is not independent. And some of us are going to celebrate independence next month, thinking that our respective Caribbean states are independent, and we are not. We are not, and neither do we care to be independent at all, because we continue to support our governments and their policies. Now, Alexis is saying, I believe that most issues must be driven by education. Yes. Yes, but education comes in various forms, right? Education begins at the home. That is where it should begin, right? And in some cases, it should be extended to the church or to whatever, the mosque, or whatever your religion is, right? Or your spirituality is, and then it should be to the school. So there are three institutions that most societies have. Right? And it doesn't have to be, I'm saying, a church. You don't have to go to a church if you don't subscribe to the Christian religion. You could go to the mosque or whatever if you have a home religion, if you're Rastafari, whatever. Some form of spirituality, and we have lacked the spirituality because we're following our white masters. They're more atheistic. They're no longer religious, so we are no longer religious. They're more materialistic, and they're telling us that, oh, if you want to grow your economy, this is what you have to do. And this neoliberalism, if you read it very well, neoliberal economic model is really religion. It has nothing to do with economics. Because what they're telling you is to have faith in a market. How can you have faith in a market? You have to regulate your market. You have to have some control over your markets. You have to regulate your economy. But they're saying, no, let the market do whatever it needs to do. And then people stay back, they look at the market, and the market destroys the economy. So that, in essence, is religion. It's a blind religion. People follow it, even at the highest level, at the university level. That is what they promote. Okay, so talk about religion, yeah, even those people are religious. Stephen Knight is saying they're trying to avoid the economic question. They need to stop signing these terrible economic deals with the United States. Now, because we don't control our economics, as we were saying last night, Stephen, I don't see them not being able to do so. Because as Alexis said, it was Thazi said, that they control us through their military arm. The US is the military arm, and he's suggesting that while Europe are the bankers. Okay, so the fact is that this is in an economic agreement, and militarism, criminality, all of these things, empire, go hand in hand. Very important that we understand these connections. Bim Lady saying, good night, everyone. I'm between the Marcia Week show and yours. Okay, no problem. And then we have here, Thazi Macabas is saying, the one about the United States is already taking away the rights of Americans without taking away their weapons. Yes. The fact is that we often confuse the Second Amendment with the trafficking by the military-industrial complex of arms. And we ought not to do that, because one of the things that we have to separate is that the United States is becoming a draconic state where militarism and dictatorship are the order of the day. So what citizens are saying, and the Constitution, the founding fathers said that one day your government will eventually become a dictator, and you need to be able to have arms to fight them back. So the arms of the Constitution were not set for citizens to fight against citizens. They were really meant for citizens to fight against a dictatorial government. But our government and our institutions are not telling us that. They're telling us that we have to get rid of our arms, and after they have successfully disarmed the population, then they will be able to institute fully their dictatorial government. Very important that we understand this. Now we have Thazi Macabas is saying drug traffickers are also the people in suits, leaders in our societies. Absolutely, they're at the top. The drug traffickers are at the top, and the arms traffickers also are at the top. And that is what we've got to understand in this society that we live in, the region we call the Caribbean. Now, our government is a criminal enterprise, and we need to get to understand that it is not something that is going to be improved upon. Right? And if we do this, if we protest, then you're going to get it. This is criminal. These are criminals, and they're going to fight you. It's a violent system, and if you're going to change anything, it has to be done in a violent way, because violence begets, as I told you, violence, right? And that is how it happens here in the region. Okay, so is it that you have anything more to say? I think that this is it. But do you have any questions? Any other comments? You seem to be between you're distracted. So I think that if you're distracted, I can go and do something more productive. Any questions? Any other comments? And if you would like, let me see if anybody would like to come and share their talk on the screen. You can. I would invite you to come if you want. Let me send you the guest invitation link, so you could enter the chat and talk. If you don't want to write, then you could discuss. But I think that it's now the ball is in your court. I have presented everything that needs to be presented tonight. So that is the link. If you need to, you can enter and you want to come and chat. You don't have to show your face. You can talk in audio and let us hear what you have to say about crime and violence in the region. Is it that it's exploding? And we can see where even Trinidad and Tobago, 27 per 100,000 citizens are snuffed out every was last year, but that's the report this year. So it was snuffed out. 27 per 100,000 is the stats for crime and violence from Trinidad and Tobago. That is something serious from a country that was doing well and is one of the most industrialized nations in the Caribbean. Something is definitely wrong with that. And there was an article here on Trinidad and Tobago about the crime from the UK, right? Crime and violence, and there was a report from the UK. And we want to look at some of the things that they're saying about UK reveals over 180 gangs operating in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me see if my thing went off. Okay, I don't know why it's not coming up. Let me go and click on the site again. Let me go here. Okay, it's not coming up. All right, so UK is reporting that over 180 gangs are operating in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is coming from the Trinidad Guardian. A newly released United Kingdom government assessment has painted a sobering picture of the extent of gang activity in Trinidad and Tobago, estimating that more than 180 gangs operate across the country and linking organized criminal groups to roughly 1/3 of all murders. The report, published by this month by UK Visas and Immigration as part of the country police policy and information note series, provides one of the most comprehensive recent international assessments of gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. While designed, let me close this thing, I don't know why it came up again. While designed primarily to assist British officials in evaluating asylum applications, the document offers an extensive examination of the country's criminal landscape and the challenges facing criminal enforcement agencies. According to the report, criminal gangs remain heavily concentrated in economically disadvantaged urban communities, particularly in and around Port of Spain and along the east-west corridor. However, the document notes that gang-related violence has also spread into other areas, extending southward towards Chaguanas and San Fernando, and increasingly affecting Tobago. Even Tobago is affected by the crime and violence. The assessment estimates that approximately 186 gangs were operating in Trinidad and Tobago as of 2023, with a combined membership of around 1,750 individuals. Among the most influential groups identified are the Muslims and Rasta City gangs, which reportedly serve as major power centers around which smaller gangs often align. And we say, while the report notes that Trinidad and Tobago's gangs are smaller and less dominant than notorious transnational gangs such as the El Salvador's MS-13, it nevertheless describes them as major drivers of violent crime. Now, that is also preventing many Trinidadians, they're suggesting, from entering the, what do you call it now, the UK, because the UK is afraid that if Trinidadian citizens go there, they're going to also spread crime and violence there. So what they're doing too is destroying the image of our region. Maybe we won't be able to get loans, right? Some of our students might not be able to go abroad to study. They will probably limit the issuance of visas to our citizens. So this is going to affect us, right? We should be having here 800 people on this live because this is a serious, epidemic in the Caribbean that is going to affect the Caribbean in many ways. And we are not taking it seriously. As I'm suggesting, the DR is better than many of us because they're just 8.9 per 100,000. We are in the 20s, many of us, Okay, and yet still we are taking this lightly. That is something that, oh, somebody died here and there, but they are militarizing the countries as we speak, right? They are militarizing us. Now, Alexis is saying in the Caribbean, people need to seriously examine themselves and how life is to be lived. Yes, but the thing about it is that unless we also grasp the truth, embrace truth for what it is, then we are not going to take it seriously. I think that for the most part, people take podcasts as entertainment. If I check most of what is happening on the podcast, it's just entertainment. We don't talk about serious issues like these. These are not the issues we want to talk about because they are not going to entertain us. And we are not going to hear gossips from these because there's nothing to gossip about. More than these are the raw facts. What are we going to do with them? How are we going to improve on the problem that we are actually discussing in this? Okay, so this is this is the problem we're facing with our Caribbean people. They are still more attuned to what you call it now, entertainment, podcasts than to serious discussions about what is happening. Okay, so any other point that we want to raise? I think that I have raised some important point. There was something else though that I saw coming out of Trinidad that I wanted to highlight from here. It says that criminologist says UK report on Trinidad gangs credible. So we have here a Trinidadian criminologist, and he's suggesting that the report that was given by the UK is credible about Trinidad's violent crimes. A recent United Kingdom Home Office report estimating that 186 gangs with approximately 1,750 members are operating in Trinidad and Tobago has reignited discussion about the country's crime situation. However, experts are saying the document should be viewed. The document should be viewed within its intended context. The June 2026 report titled Country Policy and Information Note, that's the CPIN, Gangs and Organized Crimes in Trinidad and Tobago, stated that gangs were linked to 43% of 43.7% of murders in 2024 and about 1/3 of murders in 2025. It also identified major gang groupings, including Muslims and Rasta City, as key players in criminal activity, while highlighting the growth of splinter gangs and independent criminal networks. Now, the question is, are they criminalizing the Muslims and the Rastafarians, it seems, because they say Muslims and Rasta City. So I apparently think that they are targeting these two religions or religious groups. However, criminologist Dr. Randy C. Prasad said yesterday that the report was not intended to serve as an indictment of TNT or as a travel advisory. The purpose of that report was not to disseminate information in terms of the gang situation in the country. If readers look very carefully at the report, they would realize that it cites the sources of the information, and the information that's the report on gangs is well known and well documented. So this is no lie. This is something serious that is happening in Trinidad, a small nation state having over 186 gangs in that country. Now, how can that country be safe? And such a small, tiny country, a tiny island. Okay? So how are we going to deal with these things? Because the government is not going to deal with it. And the same people who are telling us that, nothing was wrong with the United States killing those Caribbean citizens, the boats that were struck and the people who died, they are the same people in power. And do you think that they are going to try to contain crime and violence? Or do you think that they will ask the United States to come and just gun us down, strike us, because they want to get rid of criminal elements in our respective Caribbean nation states? Now, these are the hard questions that we should be asking, which we are unfortunately not asking. Okay? So, what do we say? What do we have to say thought you would have been very happy. You would have been the live chats would have been on fire for a topic like this. It doesn't seem like you are interested in this topic at all. Is it too heavy? Or is it's something that should be generating much interest? But I'm not seeing it. Why is it that we tend to generate a lot of interest about race, and that also is important, but when we talk about these serious matters like crime and violence, people are silent. Let's hear from you. What do you have to say about the matter? I think I have been beating off my gum quite a bit. All right, so if you're not interested in the topic, I think that this is what you're not very interested tonight in crime and violence. So make sure that you like the live and you share the topic with as many people on the platform so that we can have the thing discussed. I believe they're going to ask you, the United States, to continue what they're doing with the so-called drug trafficking. Yeah, I think that's what they will eventually do. Right, I think that they're going to ask the United States to put fear in citizens, because the whole question is that citizens respond based on fear. Caribbean citizens respond when you deal with lives and you deal with videos that deal with doom and fear. Anything that any element of fear, that is what people talk about, and corruption charges, and when it has nothing to do with anything, and it's not helping you to understand who is behind the corruption, right? That is what Caribbean people tend to, that's what they're attracted to. Doom, fear, anything that will imbibe fear, kill citizens, and then they'll talk about it, but they can't do anything about it. Right? So I think they will continue to strike the countries. But most importantly, they will ask the police force to kill citizens at will. Yeah. All right, so thank you so much for joining the live session. Thought you would have been more interested in something like this, a topic that is very important, a topic that is going to affect our lives, might involve the fact that our visas might be canceled and other things that the United States might impose if we do not deal with it, even though they are behind it. But guess what? That is what we have to deal with. Maybe at that time you will be interested in talking about it. Not now, right? So we have to learn to be to have foresight and to be able to be visionary and not to talk about things when they're happening in the moment, but to look ahead and see what lies ahead based on what history has informed us. Because if we're repeating the same things, which we are doing in the Caribbean, unfortunately, we're repeating the same mistakes over and over, and that is why our lives are not improving, and the politicians can get away in doing the same things over and over again, and there is some form of mental illness where that is concerned. Because we see the same things happening, yet we think that it's going to change. And that, to me, is a blind religion, too, because if you're seeing the same things with the same actors, the same system that controls the actors, doing the same thing over and over, yet you change them and expecting that things are going to eventually change and improvement and upliftment is going to happen, then I don't know what sort of mindset pervades the Caribbean region. There might not be any hope for the majority of us if we continue to tread on this path and this way of thinking. So any other response, any other statements, questions, comments? If you want to talk, you can talk. I sent you the link. You don't have to join with your face. You can join audio. And if you want to say something about what you've seen, some insight that you have gleaned and you want to share with us, you want to, discuss with us, then feel free to do so. You're saying that, Steve Knight is saying, I believe trains coming is not going to happen overnight, but it's going to come. Yes, I think that it's nearer than we think, right? The fact that they were shooting people here in the Caribbean Sea, I mean, even in recent times, mean that the train is already here. Now, the fact of the matter is, are more trains coming? Then that is the question we need to ask. But the trains have already come here. We saw the ships, you know, when the U.S. went after Venezuela, they were in the Caribbean, right? Right there in Trinidad. We saw ship in Jamaica, right? And in Haiti, in other parts of the region. So the ship is already here. Now, the intensity of the destruction is what has not yet happened, but perhaps will soon be happening soon. So when we see a few people, a few deaths, we don't really talk much about it. Just like the crime and violence, when we have a few, we don't talk much about it until it increases in intensity, overwhelms us, then we begin to cry. And then we're going to, you know, pack up a live. If things happen now, everybody's on the live because you're afraid and you don't know what's coming next. And that is how Caribbean people respond to intellectual stuff. They're not interested in what is happening. They are just interested in the reaction to what is happening. And they say, sorry, I'm in the car heading to work. No, no problem. I mean, change. You know, I understand exactly what you're saying, Stephen Knight. All right, so thank you so much, people, for joining the live. It was a great discussion. Please like the live and share it so that we can have greater discussions. All the best to you. Bye-bye.